This session is on navigating the crossroads, the impact of U.S. tariff and non-tariff measures on India-U.S. relations. Who else than a lawyer can address this gathering first?
Good afternoon, everyone. So this particular session essentially will be with regard to the U.S. trade tariffs that have been imposed on India in particular. So as we all know, that the U.S. president had essentially revealed that there would be a certain tariff measures that would be imposed under a reciprocal trade framework. This was around in April when this was released. Thereafter, imports into US would essentially attract about a 10% tariff, and this was supposed to be there even when there was a pause period, 90-day pause period, irrespective. Apart from that 10%, they also did essentially reveal that there would be a larger trade tariff that would be imposed on any surplus that was essentially coming into India. So the whole aspect or requirement was essentially to see that whatever, it was basically to get US back on track as far as its manufacturing vision was concerned. It was also to try and propagate employment. So that's the whole reason why the whole tariff imposition started, and the whole, there have been reciprocal tariff trades that have been imposed throughout. So today's session that is being presented by Debashish is going to essentially revolve around this whole aspect. And with regard to this, Debashish, if I could just welcome you on stage. Thanks. So Debashish is basically going to look at what has happened from the levy of the tariff perspective, which are the sectors that are essentially getting impacted, and what mitigation measures the government is doing and what the companies essentially should do in order to deal with this.
Thank you, Savita, and thank you, IACC, for this opportunity. And I know that we are probably dealing with the most uncertain subject of the day. I'm not sure, I was not there in the first half, but I'm pretty sure that this is the most uncertain, because though I'm speaking, probably I am also not certain about the thing that I will speak, and by the end of my 20 minutes session, whether those will be still valid or not. So that uncertain probably the tariffs or the trade tariffs are. But anyway, so see, before probably coming to the slides, so what I wanted to tell is that we are talking about US, which is the largest economy in the world, almost around close to $30 trillion, almost 26% of the world's GDP. While if that is not big enough, what we are talking about in terms of consumption, almost the $23 trillion is the consumption of US, despite being only 4.5% of the world's population. And so that being the case, so we are dealing with probably somebody who consumes almost 30% of the production that is happening worldwide, though they are only 4.5%. So anything that comes as a tariff from that country can have impact all over the world, which has already happened. So, like Sabita was mentioning, once Mr. Trump took over the office for the second term, and as probably promised, so the tariff started, and it already we had this MFN rate. I think it was mostly in the range of probably 0 to 7 or 10% at max. But there was a baseline tariff that was brought in, it is 10%. Then there was a country-wise tariff, we'll see it probably in the slides. But of course that created a lot of turmoil in the supply chain across the world. So, I mean, while probably we are learning to deal with that, as if it was not enough, then we are now dealing with the different kind of geopolitical situation, the wars, and then suddenly there is some supply chain disruptions of the rare metal or magnet and all other materials. So therefore, my friends from supply chain here probably have to deal with a lot in the coming days. And again, more of them are uncertain. So therefore, really, what is that we can plan for? I think Savita was mentioning about that I'm going to deal with how to mitigate them. Of course, I will talk about how to mitigate them, but it's probably the most difficult part of it is to how to mitigate this kind of uncertain tariffs. So I'll probably, with that, I'll just go to the next slide, which talks about, maybe if you can just move to the next slide, which I deal with, what are the three things that I'll be dealing with, what has happened, and probably why that happened, and then, it's here, sorry, I didn't realize. And what is the probably key sector-wise tariff impact, and what are those factors that we can look at to mitigate the strategies? So, like I was telling that the baseline tariff, which came into effect from April 5th of 2025, which was around at 10%. That's for all the goods from all the countries. Then what happened is that there is a country-wise tariff, which is basically probably they called it, what the US called is reciprocal tariff, which was much higher than the baseline tariff, and that was country-specific. How probably those country-specific tariff was computed? What we understand is that depends on the how much tariff that the country was imposing on the US goods that was getting imported to that country. Based on that, the country-wise tariff that was kind of imposed. India, as you see somewhere in the right side, at 26%, but there are many other countries, predominantly the countries probably India compete with that is even at a much higher rate. Like you see China or Indonesia or maybe Vietnam. So they are all probably at a much higher rate. While probably some of the countries after this specific tariff retaliated through their retaliation tariff, but India as a country has chosen to a much better route of bilateral trade talk, which is in much that's happening in progress. But specific to China, what happened is that based on whatever that was happening geopolitical and based on other aspects, the tariff was much higher at 125%, but as of now, this is now stands at around 30%, because there is a specific, based beyond the 10% tariff, there is a specific tariff of 20%, so therefore at 30%. And all other tariff that I'm talking about, other than the baseline tariff, the country-specific tariff is now it's at pause, and we'll get to know the result on July 9th, which is not very far from here. So this 90 days pause which was given will end soon. So what are the countries doing now, like India doing? Probably most of the countries are probably rushing towards to have a bilateral trade agreement with US and see how probably where they end. And like we saw yesterday, or probably today morning, there was a news that China has already signed a trade agreement with US, but I think White House had a different aspect to it. But every country or most of the countries that has been there in the right side of the country are trying to have a trade agreement. UK has already signed a deal. So beyond this, since we are in Chennai, we have to talk about the sector. You look at the auto sector, so beyond all these country-specific tariffs or the baseline tariff, there is also sector-specific tariffs. That means auto and auto parts, auto components are 25% from 3rd April 2025, even before the baseline tariff of 10% comes. So that is already there. Similarly, steel and aluminum also started with 25% as a sector-specific tariff, which is also increased to 50% from 4th June. So therefore, this is the tariff, but there is a pause, like I said, and this pause is only up to July 8th. From July 9th, we'll get to know how probably whether it will come back at exactly the same rate that was agreed, or how many countries are able to probably do a bilateral trade, so that these tariffs probably will not impact as much as it was supposed to impact. So these are the, but good thing is that I'm sure that some of them probably would be some sectors which are still exempted. That's probably because US need them more than the others. Pharmaceutical sectors, some of the smartphone manufacturers, the semiconductor sectors, or some other specific sectors related to laptops and smartphones are exempted as of now. That is being investigated by the US kind of trade department. Once they come to a conclusion, whether there would be tariff or what is the rate of tariff, that will be decided. So having said this, I mean, this is what has happened, but why probably that happened, it's important to understand. So of course, there is a trade imbalance that particularly relating to goods trade imbalance, mercantile trade imbalance. Of course, in service trade, probably in most of the country, with most of the countries, US probably has it in a better hand, but in so long as trade balance is concerned, net negative trade balances. So therefore, that is the number one reason why the US president feels that there has to be a tariff to bring certain balances to it. Of course, the second part could be promote US manufacturing and the job creation there. So that probably he has been talking for a long time, and he believes, or at least this trade, by way of bringing this higher tariff, he believes that some of the manufacturing can be shifted to US, and so which will help in creating job, which probably we are also doing it here in India. Then the tariff rates, when probably it was compared, the reciprocal tariff or the tariff that was been imposed by the other countries was much more, and so therefore there is a reciprocal tariff to that extent, which probably needed a higher tariff rate from the US. That's the, at least the, what we understand from different kind of press release that's coming from the US government. And it can also be a good point to leverage the good negotiation with the countries to have a better trade deal, so that you already have at this rate, and therefore, you probably have an upper hand on the table to bring get a better negotiation in the trade talk. And of course, there could be appeal for the domestic population for the for different political reasons maybe. So, I mean, having said this, probably we'll see, but just before I coming to the sector specific impact, from the key sector specific impact, it is important to tell that this special country-wise tariff, which is probably much higher than the tariff that US was imposing, has been brought under a special act, which is almost like not almost like, it is under the Emergency Act, Country Emergency Act. So it is a special power that has been given to the president beyond the, which probably does not even require the approval of the Congress. So it can be exercised at an emergency situation. That is the provision that has been kind of brought in to bring this tariff. So it has already been challenged in the US court, and the lower level courts have already come to a conclusion that the president has probably overdone, or probably has gone beyond his power to bring this tariff, so therefore it's not valid. However, the higher court has given a stay, but ultimately it will be decided probably by the US Supreme Court. But till that time, since it's a stay by the higher court, the tariff remains, and we'll get to know on July 8th, probably a week from now, or maybe 10 days from now, we'll get to know what's the fate of this, and in our country, I mean with India, because there is a trade talk that's going on, bilateral trade talk that has been going. We'd never know whether we'll able to close that before July 8 or not, but that's how we are. So now looking at, just some of the key sectors from India that has been impacted. So how probably I have put it here is that what is those key sectors that had impacted and how much it is impacted, and what was the pre-existing rate and what is the current rate if it is exported from India, and then where are we on the competition. So who are our nearest competition, which are the countries who are our nearest competitor in all these sectors, and what is the competitive edge that we have or we don't have. So that's how this slide captures. If you look at, the precious or semi-precious stones, which almost $9.93 billion, which is almost about 13% of the total export that India is doing to US, which was highest tariff that was applicable was actually 13%. So some of them were 0 and some of them the highest was 13. But now there is a base tariff of 26%. So that means, so how this 26% work is, there is already a MFN rate. That means there is a basic tariff rate which was already applicable plus 26%. Let's say it was 3%, so it will become 29%. So therefore, there is a 26% of tariff that is applicable on precious metal and stones. However, if you look at Switzerland, which is probably the another country which exports much of this product to US, they are at 31%. So therefore, even, this 31% of Switzerland is coming from the country-specific tariff which has been imposed. It was not a normal tariff. Of course, nobody will do 31% normal tariff, but so therefore, comparatively still, we are even at a competitive stage, even if we are not able to come to a conclusion by the trade talk. So it's not that it's only impacting India, it's impacting the whole global supply chain. So here what I'm trying to say is that even with this 26%, and even if we are not able to close the trade negotiation by July 7th, we still have certain sectors which are more impacted but still have a competitive edge. Of course, there could be certain countries who would be less than 26%, but as of now, they are not exporting these products at that scale. We never know that whether some new country will come up and try doing this, but as of now, it's not the case. That's what probably I'm trying to present. So if you look at electrical machinery and equipment, similarly, of course, as of now, China still have almost their baseline is 20 plus 34, so 54%. So therefore, still India has a upper hand as of now. Pharmaceuticals, as of now, it is exempted. Like I said, pharmaceutical, semiconductors, smartphones, laptops are still in the exemption. So therefore, we don't know what will happen to that. So once it comes to a picture, that will get impacted because that is one of the biggest sector which is getting impacted by this. Petroleum products, petroleum products is also exempted. So next is probably textile and apparels. That's what is more important. Again, the nearest competitor probably Bangladesh, China, and all that thing. So I have just put here in China. We still have some kind of leeway, and we don't know what happened yesterday. Like I think based on their Geneva agreement, it looks like India-U.S. and China has entered into some kind of a trade agreement. We don't know exactly how, probably in a day or two we'll get to know, but depends on that, we'll get to know whether we still have an advantage or not. Similarly, other products that I have mentioned in the table, I don't want to go one by one, but you can look at for yourself. There are certain countries which probably are in a better placed, are better placed than India. Comparatively, those countries are also exporting the products, but still from this region there are many other products which India still, even if it probably remains at 26% at a better place. So why I am saying this, because it's not that everything is negative towards this trade talk. It's only about the uncertainty, and we hope that post July 9 things will become more certain. And therefore, but comparatively, while probably it has disturbed the trade, it has disturbed the global supply chain, but it's not all negative. There are still some positive sides to look at it, and that's what I want probably present in this slide. So now, what I wanted to say is that what is that government is doing to mitigate the risk, and what is that probably companies should do to mitigate the risk. So what government has done so far, let's look at it. So if you look at government, immediately after this, whenever this big tariff that was got imposed, government has already certain stake, because there are certain particular industry which was highlighted by the highest office in the US, and so therefore a certain action that has been taken. You look at the motorbikes, particularly not the kind of 100cc or 200cc bike that we are talking about. The big bikes have been already major cut on the import duty that has already been given. The whiskey, which was a major import, has also been given a big cut on the tariff. Some of the electronic equipments that has been also given. You know, there is something called a Google tax, the equalization levy, which is at 6%, that has also been taken away from April 25 from the last budget. There are also, we probably have to link certain other sectors, certain players have been given access, be it telecom or be it, let's say, electric vehicles, have been given access to the Indian market, which was not happening for long. So therefore, it's not only the tariff, there is non-tariff action that government has already taken to see how probably all this risk can be mitigated. And when we are going for a trade negotiation, we both are equal and probably have a better deal with the US. So that's the government that has been doing. Not only that, because of course US is the biggest consumer, like I said, and of course they are the biggest trading partner for India, there is no doubt about it. But if so happens that we are not able to come to a discussion point where the probably not agreeable tariff rate that we are able to come to, so then what should we do? We have to kind of evolve and find out other markets to export. So therefore India is very aggressively getting into FTA negotiation with various other countries that has been given in these slides. And as all of you know, probably India-UK has already signed the deal. It's only that the documents that has to be probably come. And India-US has at a very kind of, I think at the highest level, the discussion that's happening at any point of time, we'll get to know whether the bilateral trade is going through or not. Of course, there are certain kind of roadblocks that's coming given the kind of tariff that US has already charged and given the kind of negotiation that's happening. But what government is doing is that already negotiating with multiple other countries, and some of the trade bilateral FTA has also been closed, some of them are in process. So while so far I am talking about what government is doing, and while so far I am talking mostly about the tariff barriers, there are also multiple non-tariff barriers that is also in place. I mean, we know that for a specific fact, this medical equipments or the pharma has to go through real stringent certification requirements. So therefore, there are already some kind of non-tariff barriers that has been in place. And there are also talks about whether the trade, whether the tariff also will impact the service industry. We know what was happening to, or what's happening to the H-1B visa holders, or how visa probably is getting restricted. We don't know. That could be one of the non-tariff barrier as well. So that all this is required from both the countries, from their respective end, so that the negotiation happen, I mean, at the time of negotiation, so that both the countries can come to a proper conclusion. So why this is probably mostly driven by what government is doing. So my last slide would probably, I want to talk about what is that probably as companies or as the exporter or importer from US, what is that we should do? One is that I think, gone are those days that we'll have kind of certainty, though I started with that, we live with so much of uncertainty, but I think that's going to be the way of life for the trade. So therefore, what should we do? I mean, with all the development of technology that is happening all around us, we somehow find out how to mitigate the cost of manufacture that's happening in India. And we need to kind of invest in the R&D and technology to have a better way of manufacturing, so that possible mitigation of this additional tariff cost can be kind of addressed. Then the other part is that diversify. When I mean to diversify, what I mean is that, of course, US is the biggest trade partner for India. But unless we diversify, unless we find markets beyond US, then sooner or later, if the trade deal is not happening the way that we want it, then we cannot be suffering losses, or we cannot be running the business for a long term with kind of having this kind of uncertainty. So therefore we need to have, and government is already trying to make different FTAs with other countries. So companies also should find customers to the extent possible in the other countries, not only the market, also the product line which will cater to those markets. Thus that's the second point of diversity. Third is about express. So while we are talking here in a forum, at the same time the government at the highest level is also negotiating with the US governments for the trade body. So therefore it's very important for us that we should go and tell the government what is our ask, what will be our problem, what happens, or what are the both tariff as well as the non-tariff barriers that we are dealing with, which can be addressed or which should be addressed on the negotiation table. Unless we go and tell, of course government will collect, but unless we kind of actively pursue with the government our problems, government also would not find it easy to probably solve all the possible problems that will come in the trade barrier. So therefore, and it's not only about going and telling your problem. If we have solutions in our mind, whether acceptable or not, at least it should be expressed to the government. So that's the third thing, according to me, we should do. We talk about invest, we talked about diversify, and then express. Then about, of course, aware about what's happening around, because like I said, it's probably the most dynamic thing that's happening. And every day morning you have to read news or every moment to understand where exactly that we are standing. So that's why it's very important this kind of event happens and we understand what's happening to our product, our industry, our sectors, or the market to which we are exporting. So my point here is that invest, diversity, express, and aware is the idea framework on which probably the companies should work to prepare themselves for this uncertain kind of tariff world that we are living in. Hopefully we should have a better hope we should have certainty probably next month onwards. Hopefully we have a negotiation with multiple other countries that also conclude soon, which of course the government is trying probably at a war footing. Hopefully we get to see that. I think I had to say this and I had to conclude. Any other questions? Probably I can take it up.
I was going to pose two questions to you, actually.
Yeah, sure, sir.
So one is, considering that India's reciprocal tariff rates are relatively low, is there a risk that we would essentially become a dumping ground for imports from, the countries like China and Vietnam?
Yeah, so that's very much possible. I think, like I said, comparatively, we are at 26%, which is probably much lesser than China, or 46% of Vietnam, or Indonesia, 34%, and all that. So therefore, a fear that always arises that will India be a dumping ground for all their products, or probably India become the word that is being used is that COO washing. Whether India will become the country of origin washing for their products to come through India and get exported to US. So I'll answer to this. Indian government is very much aware of this. Industry is also very much aware of this. So what Indian government is doing, if you look at in the last few months, there are multiple non-tariff measures or also tariff measures you would have seen in the steel. They are working on most of the tariff and non-tariff barriers. You look at the BIS standards that's coming in, the QCOs that is getting kind of notified. In the last 1.5 years, I think more than 150 quality control orders by the BIS authorities that has been done. Some of them probably to address this kind of issue so that India doesn't become a dumping ground for the products from China, Vietnam, and other countries who probably have a much higher tariff rate. Similarly, talking about whether the country of origin, whether it will come to India, I will just do the last mile assembly and then export to US, so therefore I will enjoy the 26%. It's not that easy. So the country of origin rules in US also much stringent. You have to prove that there is substantial transformation that's happening in India. That's the test. And if you have a very cursory look at the US kind of different cross laws, cross kind of rulings, you will find lot of cases on what is this substantial transformation. So it will not be easy that way, but Indian government is probably aware of it, and they are working on both tariff and non-tariff measures to have a check on this. But it's happening. I mean, it's not, I don't know whether it's happening in India or not. Maybe probably people here will be knowing more, but there are certain attempts that are being made, yeah.
So then how does a contract structure help?
So that's very important aspect. In fact, the contract structuring is the most important aspect here. See, suddenly you have a contract at a certain price to your customer in the US. Then comes tariff of 26%. Suddenly the landed price of the product becomes 26% more than what you are contracted. So, I mean, your customer may or may not say that, no, who is going to probably take the extra burden of the contract, because you have a contract which is the landed price. So there you have to look at your contract clause very kind of, probably you would not have seen it, you being a lawyer, you know it's much better than me. So the clauses of the contract becomes a very important aspect. You know, in one of my client conversation, it also probably being discussed whether this is a force majeure clause, that because 26% nobody saw it coming, or so therefore, yeah, so whether fall under that or not, whether there is any kind of open areas in the contract which I can say that the additional duty that is coming into picture, which was not contemplated at the time of contract, has to be borne by the customer, or again, or maybe a fresh contract where both of them has to agree bear 50-50% or 60-40%, whatever the way that agree. So therefore the contract clause which was originally agreed, which did not contemplate this additional tariff, is very important. So if the first step that has to be done is to work upon that.
Thank you so much, Debashis. So I'm just going to open up the floor for some questions, if there are any. So I guess, yeah, please.
Yes, Amit.
Why does the WTO fit in?
Okay, that's a good point actually. So WTO, what has happened, Samil, is that like I said, already it has been challenged in the court. Of course, it's a matter where it should go to WTO, because all of us have agreed that if you in a WTO, that if you impose a tariff on one country, you should have to impose on all other countries. Unfortunately, for the last, I don't know how many years, at least 8-9 years, there is if you once go to kind of appeal to the WTO members will give an order, and it will go to appellate forum if somebody wants to probably appeal against that. The appellate forum members has to be appointed by some of the country, and US is one of the country who has to appoint a member. And US has not appointed a member for almost like 8-9 years now. So therefore, the appellate forum is almost non-existent. So therefore, to that extent, even if somebody goes to the appellate for WTO forum, which probably people have gone, it will be appealed against, and it will get stuck there. So unfortunately, that's where it got stuck, and we don't have a forum or quorum probably at the appellate forum of the WTO to address this at this point of time.
Any other question?
You have mentioned two things, sir. There are two questions I have.
Yes,
One
sir.
is on you said since it has been stayed by the High Court in US,
Yeah.
is there any expectation by which we will get a clarity? Because if that happens, then what happens to all the imports which got cleared during that period?
So, like I said, since what has been stayed is that, first, the judicial authority said that it is beyond the power of the president to bring tariff under that National Emergency Act. So therefore, it's not good in law. That order has been stayed. So therefore, the original order remains. Understood? So is that clear? So therefore, the order to levy tariff remains. Therefore, all the order that has been, all the levies that has been imposed remains valid. But I don't know exactly the timeline by which it will come to the matter will be decided by the higher judicial forums.
Second question is on the first point of sale. We understand that many I mean, many countries have started using that as a mechanism.
So yeah, that's probably that's a good point that I had missed. People should look at first point of sale related benefits, if that can be taken or not. That has to be examined on case to case basis. You are right.
And for an Indian company also, will it be a mechanism to do planning or for first point?
Okay, so this planning that I was talking about initially when I started, of course, the supply chain reorientation is something that we have to make. And like I was talking about looking at markets beyond US, also possibility. But I'm saying these are all different possibilities, but we don't know what will happen on July 8th or July 9th. If we have a trade deal, which is probably both the governments are sitting and doing, it's a great deal, then we really don't have to look at a supply chain reorientation, because that involves cost. And you probably put all this cost and then it doesn't happen, then it doesn't really work. So therefore, with so much of uncertainty, while that can be looked at, but at this point of time, it can be at least kind of assessed, understood, but not at least probably to be implemented at this point of time, unless we have a FTA that is in place. But I think all of us are expecting a much better deal. Let's see.
So I think with that we can close the session. If anybody has any suggestions that we can put towards the government, we're happy to field those and represent them on your behalf. So with that, thank you so much, Devashish, for that roundup.
Thank you. My request, Mr. Prabhu Bala, Regional Vice President, to present a memento to our panelists. Thank you. Hope you took one group photo.